Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Exceed fighting system. I'm trying my hand at another character analysis slash sharing of the journey, and this one is about Ken. Ken has been one of my favorite Street Fighter characters for a long time. He seems like the fun action version of Ryu, who is the more stable, smart, even-keeled character. And while they started off as barely a palette swap different, they've kind of grown in different games to different personalities. In Exceed, this is reflected, as I briefly touched on in my Akuma analysis slash Shoto discussion, with Ken being more rushdown and action-oriented, whereas Ryu being more flexible slash balance-oriented. But that's a very broad generalization. As always, I'm going to put out my disclaimer. I do not profess to be an expert at this game. I'm very much new. Season 3 is my first season of Exceed, but I have gotten several games under my belt with people at my friendly local game store, so that I consider to take this as it is. It's a sharing of my experience of the character. Right off the bat, when I first started playing Exceed, the most striking thing to me about the system was the, striking system. Strikes are fun, they're action-packed, they're the ultimate, this is what I'm doing, what are you going to do in response, flip it, okay, let's see how that panned out. The head game, knowing that you know that I know that you know, etc., etc. And my early gameplay was punctuated by constant striking. In that context, Ken is the character you want to play. Ken's basic ability is, as an action, you may close one and draw a card. So compare this to Ryu, whose base ability, I don't have him up right now, is he may move one, and of course draw for end of turn. Ken can move one, or close one, and then draw a card, plus a card for end of turn, so draw two. However, it can only close, which is a significant flexibility decrease. When he ults to his Exceed mode, this becomes bonkers. Firstly, upon exceeding, he gets to draw and reposition to near melee. And then after that, he can close one and draw and strike in the same turn. So let's say that you have 5 cards in hand. Let me flip this guy. You have 5 cards in hand, and you want to use Ken's ability. You close in, go to 6 cards. And if you have anything that seems good at that point, you can strike right away. If you don't, you can say, you know what, I'm done, and not strike. I have yet to ask about the ruling on this, and I still don't know if the phrase you may close one and draw a card means you may close one, ... also draw a card, or it means you may close one and draw a card, so if you choose to do so, you have to do both. But I assume without the Oxford comma that it's the latter, you have to do both. So, if you don't want to be in melee, you might find yourself not wanting to use that ability. But otherwise, barring that, as long as moving closer is good, this is just a better version of the draw, since you close one, draw, and if you don't strike, you still draw for turn. So it's better than prep, which is draw 2. Let's move on to looking at Ken's cards, and you see I've arrayed a bunch of cards here for references. These are the basic attacks every character has, including Ken. In Ken's hands, because of the way his ability, especially his Exceed mode ability, works, you're often going to get just a wee bit more mileage out of these moves that are in melee. Because if I'm starting here, and I really should have at least a placeholder opponent. Hang on, let me give myself a placeholder opponent who's handy. Someone who likes some distance. Ooh, yeah, Bison. I like that. That choice is excellent. Let's just put Bison here. Okay. Let's say that I am here. Ordinarily, I would be out of range for cross, out of range for grasp, perfect range for assault, right? Well, by using Ken's ability, close, immediately strike, if I were to draw into grasp or cross, because I can close and strike as a basic attack, these gain more life. These gain more value. Similarly, if I'm back here, Spike, which normally would be out of range, will use Ken's ability, close, draw, see if I have the best option, then Spike. In short, if he's coming at you from a little further away, Ken can use more normal attacks than other people can. His broader. Conversely, when he's already up in melee, all of that disappears. He can still use his Ken ability, close, draw, and then maintain tempo by maintaining his hand size with each strike, but he's no longer getting the benefits of closing in from out of range. Ken is happiest when he plays against a guy like Bison who, has a lot of attacks that are better at range 3, 4, 5 or whatnot. So Bison does something to run away, and Ken goes perfect. Close, draw, strike. And he's less happy against a character like Zangief who wants to be in melee all the time. Okay, so that's just kind of a broad strokes. Let's take a look at his kit. Ken has a couple cards that are, quote, better on the offense, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Shoryuken. +2 speed if you initiated this strike. Nebosh. +1 range, optional 1 range, if you initiated this strike. No, not this one. And his ult. +4 power if you initiated this strike. So, because of these abilities, that's literally 3 out of 7 of his custom moves, his custom cards. Ken often wants to be the striker, which plays very nicely with his ability to maintain tempo while striking. It's the exact converse, of course, of Ryu, who gets bonuses for some attacks when he's on defense. One thing that I love about Ken is how fast his attacks are when you're playing them in the right position. As a beginner, I was all about I want to strike often and I want my strikes to hit often, and less about I want to set up good strikes that set me up for value later. There are other characters that you really need to change your mindset to do that with. With Ken, he is all about just getting multiple hits, so that's why he's ahead on the speed curve in a lot of places. I'll show you what I mean. Shoryuken. If you're attacking, it's a speed 7 melee. That's on the speed curve, equivalent to Grasp, and up there with the other faster moves of other characters in melee. There's not a lot that does speed 8 in melee. I think Ryu's Shoryuken response is also 7 speed, so Ken wins out. Oh, wrong card, sorry, on that. Plus, you've got a little bit of guard on it just in case. So that's one card that's either on or above the speed curve. Further, it can be used as +1 speed, if you need to get that edge. Next, you've got, hold it a second, this guy, Axe Kick. Axe Kick is speed 4, goes up to speed 6 with a crit. So again, if you're looking to just get a hit off, Axe Kick is going to lose out to that speed 7 grab, but that's about it. And considering that up in melee range, what people are often using is something strong and punchy like Focus or Sweep to try to hit you, the Ignore armor can be very valuable. Finally, and this is very important to understand, in Exceed in general, if a card lets you close before you attack, you should not consider its range as printed. Sure, I could use Axe Kick here, and it's a speed 6 with a crit. Or, I could back up a square, use it here, speed 6 at range 1, close 1 and hit. Going off of my normal curve, speed 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., you'll notice that at range 1, speed 7 is great. At range 2, cross, speed 6 is great. At range 3, assault, speed 5 is great because it closes 2 and then hits. At this range, dive is great. Well, debatably. Advance 3, speed 4. Below that and further away, it gets more variable. We can go into Hadouken curves later, but bottom line, most moves that are any slower than that will give you some compensation with guard or armor or something, or they have very strong range to begin with. So going back to Axe Kick, you're not meant to use this in melee. You're meant to use this here with a crit so that it closes 1 and maximizes your likelihood of winning that out. And if you do, you'll notice that 5 damage with Ignore Armor is a hell of a lot more potent than 3 damage cross. Flip of this is, of course, what about Ken's ability? He's always trying to close, right? So if I'm here, close, and then axe kick, that gets him in quickly for a lot of damage. So let's go back to our prior discussion, speed, curve, and U. Tatsumaki Senpu Kyaku. One of the slower moves, granted, it's speed 3, but you'll notice that its boost is to +1 the speed of any other card you're using and then give you a strike. So again, a card that helps Ken hit faster and hit first. So right off the bat, you'll notice that I have identified, oh, and of course his Shinryuken ult, which is a little bit on the slower side at speed 6, but, you know, is massively powerful in and of itself at 11 damage. So putting all of this together, you'll see that there's a lot that Ken has that either is on curve or above curve for speed. I didn't discuss Nebosh because this is more of one of his slower response moves. Let's go back here. Now let's take a look at his Hadouken. Confusing myself. Because he has all these fast moves that can hit, his ability to hit confirm is pretty good, meaning that if he wants to make sure a hit will land, he's probably got a card that helps him do it. Let's take a look at his Hadouken. This is just such a powerhouse, it's hard to explain. At range 3 to 6 is the standard Hadouken range for the game. Anything else is Ryu, I would say, is generally considered the standard. 3, 6, 4, 4, that's the basic Hadouken. It has the usual spam text. If you hit with it, you can get it back. The thing to realize is I pulled out a series of fireballs from different characters up here for comparison's sake. And across the board, I mean, Low Tiger Shot gets a little bit extra a little bit extra range, 3 to 8 instead of 3 to 6, with crit that can make that better. And look at that guard. Go Hadouken gets a narrow range as well as a potential speed buff up to 5. Tiger Shot is just an amazingly good attack in terms of how much gauge it builds you, and we'll discuss that with Sagat. This is one of my favorite moves in the game. But you'll see that it narrows its range to accomplish that 2 to 5. All of these are tied at speed 4, speed 4, speed 4, etc. Now, Ryu gets the benefit of being able to crit to the fastest speed of all of these at 6. Nothing here competes with the speed 6 Hadouken. Go Hadouken can kind of come into the middle, but what Ken gets is +2 damage. If you're playing against Ryu, your speed 4 is a real liability here, because if you're not fairly confident that he doesn't have the Hadouken back, he might just trade and come out ahead of you. If, on the other hand, you're playing against any of these other characters, you're going to outspeed their Hadouken at appropriate range. And I could delve deeper into Hadouken mechanics across the board, but my point is, this is a 6 damage fireball that trades positively against most characters. You obviously want to read your opponent's sheet and kind of get a sense of what you're dealing with, but if you've got the range like here, playing this down with a crit is probably going to hit for 6 damage, and if you have reason to suspect your opponent isn't going to be able to respond to it, it goes right to the top of your deck and you wild strike it off again and again. So we've got some solid moves from it, and of course it goes without saying, but +1 power as the boost, and then follow with an instant strike, so you can buff. This is just a power card paired. I wish that ability was on a different card, honestly, because you very rarely want to use this for that. I haven't talked about Nebosh yet. I have a really hard time with this card because I'm not good at this game yet. I like going fast so that I make sure I hit, but that's not always the correct play. 5 guard means that, at least as far as normal attacks goes, spike and sweep will get through it and nothing else. Let me say that again. Spike and sweep will get through it and stun you with that much guard, but nothing else will. Meanwhile, Nebosh can be initiated from way the hell back here, because it's close to, on a crit obviously, close to before and still 1 to 2 range. So speed 2 from this distance, reasonably safe. Most of the Hadoukens that we've seen are sub-damage. It's not like your opponent's likely to have tons and tons of damage at this range. Further, If you're the initiator, it gets a bonus to range, which means you can be even further back and still be okay. And if you kenned to open, you can ken from here. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. I think of this as a melee move, but it is not, because, I mean, think about it. Ken, well, I guess exceeded Ken. Ken in, draw a card, decide that you're actually going for it, strike with crit, upon the reveal, close 2, and boosh, still at range at 3. My problem is that with Ken, I often end up right here, chased down, rushed down, pushed into melee with my opponent. That means that this card is a real liability. Now, you can just play it raw. I mean, your opponent might hit you, but unless it's one of those 2 moves or something at 6+ damage, you might just guard through it and get a nice solid 5-hitter back. But I don't like trading evenly with Ken unless I already have a life advantage, and he's going to be doing lots of sparring later. That's where I like the custom combo boost on this a lot better. Especially if I haven't exceeded yet, so I'm probably either low on cards or low on gauge or both. I can just custom combo, instantly draw 3 cards, 2 because it says so and 1 because I boosted, refilling my hand, and all these fast attacks that we discussed before, 1, 2, 3, if I boost speed with this and then attack with something else, now I'm threatening to maintain advantage and use my hit confirm to get this off. So yeah, pretty robust kit of specials here. Shinryuken is what I like to call a finisher. A lot of Street Fighter cards have a if this hits added to your gauge. Reading through all of the boosts, Ken doesn't have that. He has this key charge where he can just gauge up for free, but otherwise he doesn't do that. So I don't consider him superlative at getting gauge. He wants to get caged by punching you. This means that in an average game with Ken, I don't generate more than 8 gauge. In fact, I rarely generate much more than 7. It's variable, obviously. Sometimes you call it wrong more often than not. Sometimes your opponent outplays you. As such, I will tend to spend the 3 to exceed him, because that maintains tempo, or the 4 to Shinryuken. So where does that leave my once? And or do a larger number of crits during the match and not have enough for this ultimately. So where does that leave Guren Senpukyaku? I have a real hard time with this move at speed 4 because the advance 2 means you have to be at good range to make it go. And the rider on the before says you do not want to cross your opponent, but speed 4 means that you're very likely to get outspeeded by an assault at that range, unless you start far enough back. So there's just a whole lot of if coming off this card for me. Especially considering what I just said about him not being a great gauge generator. I mean, he's above average, I guess, but he's not there compared to other characters in Street Fighter, certainly Exceed. But look at the boost on this thing. True Master gives you +2 power and +2 speed, all for the low cost of discard a card. That is very hard to overstate. All these moves that are 6-ish speed become 8s. All these cards that are 5-ish become 7s. This 3 becomes a 5 with the equivalent of an assault distance on it and a lot of power. There are very few situations where I don't want to use True Master on Ken, because it makes my next attack so threatening. Even the normals, speed 2 sweep becomes a speed 4, okay, that's not impressive, with 8 power behind it, enough to crack another sweep. Spike becomes speed 5, which at range 2 to 3 will beat out assault if you're on the offense, and pierce armor and guard. And of course, it'll crush a sweep, which is what it's designed to crush. Your grasp, which is normally just a pitiful 3 damage, becomes a solid 5. Again, not probably the best card to use this with. For that, Ooh, dive. At speed 6, your opponent is probably not going first if you're more than 2 spaces away, which means you can dive past the opponent for the invincibility that this affords fairly reliably. Just there's so much good that +2/+2 can do, and I haven't even touched on how great it is with Hadouken, how great it is with no, not Nebosh, sorry. Which is the one that forces Tatsumaki Senpu Kyaku. Because with this, 5 speed, you advance past him, and boosh, ignore guard, crack him, stun him with that 7 damage. It's just good news. Further, your opponent can't really reliably react to your hand here, because even if you just have 2 or 3 cards, any 2 or 3 cards is a serious threat with +2/+2 on it. Usually when I play this, it's the one that gets teched out by my opponent, where tech lets you choose and discard a boost and play. So I'm not saying you never use this for its ult, just that to me 5 to 8 power isn't that great on a move that doesn't have a lot of hit connect potential going for it, whereas +2/+2 for your next big thing is pretty awesome. And then finally there's the ultimate finisher, Hadouken. +4 power if you initiate strike, pairs very nicely with Shoryuken as a boost for +1 speed, or Tatsumaki Senpukage for +1 speed to give you that coveted 7 speed melee, followed by ultimate to finish the game. If you're floating 3 or 4 gauge and the game is almost over, or your opponent is at like 8 life to your 2 or 3, this is the move that you want to try to close out with. And your opponent will know that you want to close out with it, and knowing that you know that he knows that you might get into mind games. Because this is the move that's going to be very difficult to counter for him. I personally like to EX this move a lot because 7 speed without having to find the right boost. But I've just given you 5 extra cards you can use to get over that +1 speed hump that you really need. Don't ever hesitate to play this on the defense if you think that if you have a good beat on your opponent. Speed 7 yeah, because if you're in melee range with him, there's a good chance that he's... I mean, you have to gauge the situation, obviously. 6 and 7s can absolutely hit you out there, but if this is in your tank, you're going to be really sad that you tried to save it for the +4 power. That's all I'm saying. In terms of the boost rushdown style, close 3 then strike, I am less than impressed by it, because with Ken, I usually want to be here to start anyway, and I have some tool that will hit from where I am. If I'm here, I've got any number of attacks that once I boost in, I'm going to be able to hit with. But, I mean, it does make it instant. Like, if I'm full screen, practically away from Bison, I can still say, well, you know what, close 3, and then strike, and there's a number of attacks that will still get in enough to actually hit. Ultimately, I often end up discarding Shinryuken for +2 force to some other effect. It's not the best way to use this card, and as I get better at the game, I'll probably do it less. That's a quick, not so quick, that's a long discussion of all of the cards. So to recap, point 1, Ken is a pretty good rushdown fighter. He wants to get in and hit. His moves, although they all look like they want to be at range 1, actually do better starting off a little further away to maximize the fact that they're not all speed 7. That being said, they are all on the speed curve for their, well, not all, many of them are on the speed curve for their range, and very good at that, and they all have very solid boosts, so don't ever feel like you're locked into, I have to strike and do nothing else with him. You have the flexibility. Don't feel as though you have to launch all your ults. It's okay to use most of your gauge on critting and maybe exceeding if the match calls for it. There is one caveat that I wanted to put out there. Famous boxer said everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face, and I believe that is so true in fighting games in general. There are some characters, whom I'm pulling out now. Well, I'll just pull out this one because it's obvious. Zenji, for example, whom close 1 and draw card is bad against. When you're in this matchup, don't exceed Ken, because you're not going to want to close against Zangief. Don't use his ability often, because why would you? Why would you feed yourself to Zangief? Also, don't hesitate to use his cross to force a retreat to set yourself up for a strike that needs more range. And don't hesitate to use Assault to back up and then come back in. You have many Assault analogs that you can use in your deck, so it's not like you need to avoid these boosts. But especially when you're against a guy that makes your preferred style of close in and punch ineffective, know what your tools are to get out of dodge, and then use them effectively. That's all I got for now. Again, I hope this has been helpful to y'all in your journey to play and learn the Exceed fighting system. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you guys next time.